In December 2000, Airbus made one of the boldest industrial bets in modern history. They committed to spending what would eventually become $25 billion to build the largest passenger aircraft the world had ever seen. A double-decker flying hotel with enough space for bars, showers, and 850 people hurtling through the sky at the same time. The engineers were extraordinary. The ambition was real, and for a moment, it genuinely looked like the future of aviation. Boeing didn't build a competitor. They didn't launch a rival superjumbo. They didn't spend billions countering it directly. They did something far more destructive. They built a completely different kind of airplane, aimed at a completely different vision of the future, and in doing so, made the A380 irrelevant without ever directly attacking it. Airbus spent $25 billion. Boeing killed it for free. But here's where it gets complicated, because this is not a simple story about one company outsmarting another. It's about two companies staring at the same data and reaching opposite conclusions. One of them was right, and the one that was right nearly destroyed itself proving it. So let's go back to the beginning, because to understand how the A380 died, you first need to understand why it was born. By the late 1990s, the global aviation industry was facing a problem it genuinely didn't know how to solve. Air travel was growing faster than anyone had predicted. Passenger numbers were doubling roughly every 15 years. And the airports that mattered most, the mega hubs like London Heathrow, Tokyo Narita, Hong Kong, and Singapore, were running out of room. Not terminal space, not gates, runway slots. There are only so many times a runway can be used in a day, and the world's busiest airports were approaching that ceiling fast. The logic was simple, almost elegant. If you can't add more flights, put more people on each one. Instead of two 400-seat planes per hour, fly one 800-seat plane. Same slot, twice the passengers. It worked on a whiteboard. It worked in every boardroom presentation Airbus ever made. The question was whether it would work in the actual world. Now, before Airbus committed to building the A380, Boeing tried to answer that same question first. In 1996, Boeing unveiled something called the 747X, a stretched double-deck version of its jumbo that could carry north of 650 passengers. Boeing took it to airlines. Airlines said they were interested, so Boeing kept refining it, kept adding features, and the costs kept climbing. By the time they looked at the numbers seriously, the market forecast was 70 to 80 aircraft over 9 years. Development costs were heading above $5 billion. The math didn't work. In early 2001, Boeing quietly buried the project. So Boeing tried the superjumbo, airlines wouldn't commit, and Boeing walked away. And then Airbus watched all of that happen and went ahead anyway. In December 2000, Airbus officially launched the A380, budget of €9.5 billion. 50 firm orders from 6 airlines. The economics pitch was compelling too. The A380 offered 15 to 20% lower cost per seat than a 747. One aircraft replacing 2 on the same route while consuming only 1 landing slot. At congested airports like Heathrow, where a single slot can be worth tens of millions of dollars annually, that argument was genuinely hard to dismiss. Emirates placed an order before the plane had even flown. 58 aircraft with options for 90 more. The biggest aircraft order in history at that point. Singapore Airlines committed. Qantas signed on. When carriers with those reputations are writing checks. Other airlines feel the competitive pressure. Nobody wanted to be left behind if this turned out to be the future. Meanwhile, Boeing was doing something that looked from the outside like a complete mess. On the very same day, in March 2001, that they killed the 747X, they unveiled a concept called the Sonic Cruiser. Delta wings, canard design, cruising just under the speed of sound. About 225 passengers. The philosophical opposite of everything Airbus was building. Airbus was betting on size, Boeing was apparently betting on speed. Richard Branson said he expected to order 3 to 6. American Airlines showed interest. Boeing laid out a 5-year plan. Then September 11th happened. Air travel collapsed overnight. Airlines burned through cash and parked entire fleets. In a single year, the industry lost more than $13 billion. And suddenly nobody cared about speed. Nobody cared about size. Airlines wanted one thing: efficiency. Boeing held on to the Sonic Cruiser for over a year, but by December 2002 it was dead. Here is where Boeing's accidental genius comes in, because they didn't start over. Everything developed for the Sonic Cruiser, the carbon fibre composite structures, the new engine architecture, the advanced aerodynamics, they kept all of it and pointed it in a completely different direction. Not faster, more efficient, not bigger, right-sized. They called it the 7E7. Then the 787 Dreamliner, 200 to 300 passengers, 20% less fuel than anything in its class, designed to fly point to point, connecting cities directly rather than funneling everyone through hubs. Portland to Reykjavik, Austin to Amsterdam, Nashville to London. Routes that could never fill 500 seats in a million years, but work perfectly well with 250. In 2004, the Japanese carrier ANA became the launch customer with 50 aircraft on order. The plane that would eventually make the A380 irrelevant was now in production. Back to Airbus, because their story was about to get significantly more painful. Each A380 contains 530 kilometres of wiring. That is over 300 miles of cables running through a single aircraft. The wings were built in the UK. Fuselage sections came from Germany and France. The tail from Spain. Everything shipped by road, river and sea to Toulouse for final assembly. Then the wiring harnesses from Germany arrived. Workers tried to connect them to the French sections, and they didn't fit. Two separate engineering teams had been working from two different versions of the same design software. Thousands of cables that were supposed to plug together simply didn't match. 2 full years of delays. Development cost that started at €9.5 billion ballooned toward 20 billion. The parent company's stock dropped 26%. €5 billion of value gone in a single day. On October 15, 2007, 19 months behind schedule, Airbus finally delivered the first A380 to Singapore Airlines. And as a flying machine, it was genuinely brilliant. Singapore reported 20% better fuel burn per seat than their 747 fleet. Emirates loved it. Passengers loved it. As an airplane, the A380 delivered almost everything it promised. The business case was a different matter entirely. Lufthansa put their A380 on Frankfurt to New York. Exactly what Airbus promised happened. Cost per seat dropped. But so did revenue per seat. When you put 500 seats onto a single route, you have to cut ticket prices to fill them. Cost went down, revenue went down almost in lockstep. Lufthansa was essentially breaking, even on a route they were now operating with enormous additional complexity. And that was one of the larger operators. Airlines that had only bought 10 or fewer had it even worse. Emirates CEO Tim Clark was blunt about it. He said the A380 was a misfit for Air France. They only had 10. Running a sub-fleet of 10 of the biggest aircraft ever built is an operational nightmare. Maintenance costs per aircraft skyrocket when you can't spread the infrastructure. Crew training becomes expensive and inflexible. Everything that gets cheaper at scale gets more expensive when you have 10 of something this complex. Only Emirates had the volume to make the economics work. Think about where Dubai sits on a map, roughly equidistant between Europe and East Asia. A few hours from Africa, directly connected to the Indian subcontinent. If you're flying from London to Sydney, or Lagos to Singapore, or Frankfurt to Bangkok, Dubai sits almost perfectly in the middle. Emirates built their entire business around that geography. One hub serving the world. And when your model is about moving the maximum number of people through a single airport, a 500-seat airplane isn't just useful, it's the whole point. At peak, Emirates was running 8 A380 flights a day to London Heathrow alone, at a slot-constrained airport where a landing permission is worth a fortune. Putting 500 people on one aircraft instead of 250 on two separate flights is a genuine, measurable competitive advantage. Tim Clark didn't buy 10 A380s, he bought 123. That is nearly half of every A380 ever built. One airline. At that volume, maintenance costs come down. Crew training becomes an asset. The spare parts supply chain actually makes sense. Every structural problem that crushed smaller operators simply didn't apply when you had a fleet of 100. But here is the trap that created. One airline was responsible for almost half of all orders ever placed. When Emirates was happy, the program was viable. When Emirates had concerns, the entire program shook. That is not a customer base. That is a single point of failure disguised as a customer base. And there was a second structural problem nobody had fully reckoned with at the start. The A380 didn't just need airlines to buy it. It needed airports to physically rebuild themselves for it. Runways needed to be wider, taxiways needed reinforcement for the weight, gates needed double jet bridges, one for each deck. Baggage systems needed to process twice the luggage from a single flight. The Port Authority of New York and New Jersey spent $175 million modifying their airports just to accommodate the A380. And that was one airport authority in one city. This created a trap that fed on itself. Airlines didn't want to order without knowing airports could handle it. Airports didn't want to spend hundreds of millions unless airlines were definitely bringing the plane. Everyone waited for someone else to go first. The 787 had none of this problem. It parked at any gate a 767 could use. No runway modifications, no special infrastructure, no coordination required. An airline could announce a new 787 route tomorrow, and the destination airport wouldn't need to change a single thing. But the most devastating blow to the A380 didn't come from economics or airport infrastructure. It came from the engine manufacturers. When Airbus was building the commercial case for the A380 around 2000, they asked GE and Rolls-Royce a direct question: is anything significantly better coming in terms of engine efficiency? Both said no. Nothing on the horizon that would materially change the fuel burn equation. Airbus's head of sales, John Leahy, later described the company as blindsided. They had assurances from both major engine makers. They committed to the program on that basis. Then, 3 years later, before a single A380 had been delivered to a single airline, GE and Rolls-Royce announced new engine families offering 15% better fuel efficiency. And those engines were going on the Boeing 787. The A380 wasn't even in service yet, and its engines were already a generation behind. Every airline doing a fleet comparison could see the gap sitting right there on the spreadsheet, and most of them chose the 787. Then oil prices made everything worse in a way nobody could have scripted. Jet fuel went from around $50 a barrel in 2003 to $147 by 2008. Operating 4 engines at those prices turned from expensive to brutal almost overnight. The cancellations came. FedEx pulled their A380 freighter order. UPS cancelled theirs. Airbus shelved the entire cargo variant. Virgin Atlantic had 6 on order and never took delivery. And the secondary market simply didn't develop. When Singapore Airlines retired their first A380s after just 10 years of service, barely broken in by aviation standards, nobody wanted them. Only around 20 airports in the world could handle the aircraft. They were scrapped. Airframes designed to last 25 years destroyed after 10 because there was nowhere for them to go. Airbus eventually accepted they had to respond to the 787 directly, but their first attempt was almost embarrassing. When Boeing announced the 787 in 2003, Airbus's official response was to dismiss it entirely. They called it a reaction to the A330 and moved on. They were so committed to the A380 thesis that they couldn't fully process what they were looking at. Airlines pushed back hard. They needed a direct competitor. Airbus produced a proposal they called the A330-200 Lite. Same old fuselage, new wings and engines bolted on. Singapore Airlines made the obvious point. If you're already designing a new wing, tail and cockpit, you might as well design a new fuselage too. Qantas rejected the proposal outright and ordered 787s instead. That forced Airbus's hand completely. In July 2006, Airbus announced the A350XWB, extra wide body, a complete clean sheet redesign from the ground up, new composite fuselage, new wing, wider cabin, everything rebuilt from scratch. Singapore Airlines ordered 20 within 4 days of the announcement. But the redesign cost Airbus 2 years and ballooned the budget from around $5 billion to over $15 billion. Step back and look at what was happening simultaneously. Airbus was publicly telling the world that the A380 represented the future of aviation. And at the same time, airlines were forcing them to build a smaller, more efficient twin-engine aircraft that was the philosophical opposite of everything the A380 stood for. The market was making very clear which argument it believed. The A350 has now received over 1,500 orders. The A380 received 251 over its entire production life. The plane Airbus didn't want to build outsold their $25 billion flagship 6-1. And this is where the story turns genuinely strange. Because Boeing was right. They correctly identified that the future of long-haul aviation was smaller, efficient twin-engine aircraft flying direct routes between cities that would never generate demand for 500 seats. They read the market correctly, and the world moved in exactly the direction they predicted. Boeing won the strategic argument by a factor of nearly 10-1 in total sales. And in doing so, they very nearly destroyed themselves. The 787 entered service 3 years late and billions over budget. Within 2 years, the lithium-ion batteries were catching fire. The FAA grounded the entire worldwide 787 fleet in 2013. Then came quality control failures, production slowdowns, delivery halts, and a near-complete production stop between 2021 and 2022. Boeing has now spent above $32 billion on the 787 program and still hasn't broken even. And that's before you account for the 737 MAX crashes in 2018 and 2019, which triggered criminal investigations, congressional hearings, and an institutional collapse that will take a generation to fully repair. So here is what you're left with at the end of all this. Airbus read the future wrong. They spent $25 billion on a vision the market rejected at the scale they needed. But Airbus survived. Because the plane they resisted building, the one airlines dragged them toward, turned out to be exactly the right answer. The A350 is thriving. Airbus is currently delivering aircraft faster than Boeing. The wrong bet didn't kill them because they were forced, almost against their own instincts, to make the right one alongside it. Boeing read the future correctly. They bet on efficiency over size, on dispersed routes over hub concentration, on the right-sized aircraft over the spectacular one. History proved them right, and being right very nearly ended the company. The A380 didn't die because it was a bad aircraft. Passengers who flew on it remember it. Pilots who flew it talk about it with genuine admiration. Emirates will keep operating their fleet well into the mid-2030s, still filling seats, still making the model work, in the one geography where it was always going to work. The plane was remarkable. The business model around it, outside of Dubai, was never quite right. It died because two companies looked at the same world and saw two different futures. One saw airports, one saw cities. One bet on concentrating passengers, one bet on dispersing them, and one of those visions matched how people actually wanted to travel. Airbus spent $25 billion finding out they were wrong. Boeing spent considerably less, making them realise it. That's not a story about one company outsmarting another. It's a story about how the biggest bets in business don't always go to whoever has the most conviction. Sometimes they go to whoever is reading the right signals in the noise. And sometimes the most expensive lesson in an industry's history is simply the cost of betting on a world that never quite arrived.